A big hello and a very warm welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow Season 8 with me, Sonali Krishna. As you know, this is the leading platform for SMEs, MSMEs and startups, and today our entire focus is on the MSME sector, and with me I am joined by Kantar's Executive Vice President, Insights Division, and he is none other than Biswapriya Bhattacharjee. Bishwa, as the industry knows him, is an expert of sorts when it comes to analysis of the MSME sector, and Kantar has had a keen eye on this space ever since we've been struck by COVID-19, and their most recent research pivots around Atmanirbhar Bharat relief package for MSMEs that was announced by the government, and it really tracks its on-ground efficacy, and this was conducted in the last 1 month or so. Without any further ado, let me get my guest onto the show. Welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, Bishwa. Pleasure to have you right here with us talking about this very, very pertinent topic.
Thank you very much. It's been a great pleasure to be here with you as well.
I want to talk about the COVID SME barometer that Kantar has undertaken and has a keen eye on ground realities and efficacies. Your headline views on the relief packages announced by the government and the offtake you've seen of it on ground.
Firstly, the relief package shows at an overall level that there's been low awareness of most of the packages, and of course low offtake for most of the packages as such. We have also seen that most businesses do not see these packages to be as relevant for their businesses as one would have liked them to, and that also does not really augur well for the industry as such, especially from an MSME perspective, more from a micro and small medium businesses perspective.
When you say not so relevant, what do you exactly mean? Why would you say it's not relevant?
Well, so let me take a step back. So we all know that businesses are under stress at this point in time. The research that we have done shows that very clearly. As a matter of fact, we see that about 7% of the businesses at this point in time really do not know if they will continue to operate their business 2 months down the line. So that's the scenario that's there on the ground at this point in time. And therefore, there is definitely a need for certain kind of intervention. The challenge that we are seeing with the government's incentive schemes, which is what I prefer them calling them rather than a relief package of sorts, I don't think they are necessarily addressing the needs of the micro and small businesses in particular. And these businesses constitute about 99% of the total businesses in India. So they are the likes of your traders, the kirana stores, the small manufacturing setup, small sets of other kind of stores and the likes, so which you'd see dotting the rest of the country and the countryside as well. Now, if you look at the problems that they are facing, their problem is managing fixed cost and working capital as such. Their problem is about getting customer walk-ins. Their problem is to see how they can potentially digitize their business. And most importantly, therefore, how do they continue doing their businesses through this COVID period and beyond? The government incentives are great, but seems to be more for the larger of the MSMEs and not really as much for the smaller of the MSMEs as such. And as I said, the fact that the awareness has not grown either is also a big concern, because if you look at across any of these incentive packages that are there, the maximum awareness is 1/3 of the businesses who are aware of any one kind of these incentives. Now that means that you're really not able to reach the message to the right set of audiences. Only once it reaches, you would be able to take certain actions. But the challenge is at the first level itself. So I think it's a host of things which culminates in this not really working well at this point in time for the MSMEs.
Right. So, I've understood a few things from what you've said, and taking a cue from that, my rejoinder would be, would you say the biggest concern for the relief package is the fact that the communication has not been effective? And what I mean by that is that A, people aren't aware of it, or are you saying what has been offered, is not effective enough?
I think a bit of both. To understand this in some more detail, I think it's important to break or look at these packages or these incentives. And broadly, what we see is that they get grouped into two sets of packages or two sets of incentives. The first set is where you are being able to provide direct benefits by increasing the time duration uh, for the payments towards the income tax or the GST returns as such. So where there's been an extension given to those. Now, what those do is that they actually give money directly in the hands of the businesses. And therefore, once businesses realize this, they start seeing them to be a lot more effective. Then there are others which are around the subordinate debt, around EPF benefits, around the central government clearing the dues, and the big one, which is in terms of the credit guarantee. Right now, these are not really the ones which are inspiring a lot of interest, even if there is a decent sized awareness. So at one level, there is an issue of awareness, which is on certain of the incentives, while at the other level, there is also a relevance issue.
Okay, fair enough. Let me ask you then, if you're calling it a relevance issue, what in your opinion would have been the most relevant aid that should have been extended by the government to this sector?
Okay, so let me again, let's look at the largest of the incentives that has been provided, which is the credit guarantee scheme, right? Now, if you look at the credit guarantee schemes, we are seeing that there is not a lot of takers out there. And if you really deep dive into why or what's happening in terms of specifically to the micro and small businesses, the businesses are looking for money. It's not that they are not. And they are looking for money for two reasons. One is working capital, and the other is from an investment perspective, right? So let's, if I were to talk about each of them, if you look at the working capital needs for the businesses, this is something that we have been doing on a month-on-month basis. So when we started this off as a barometer tracker in April, we saw that 51% of the businesses had less than 2 months of working capital with them. When we did this in June, we saw that there were only 18% of the businesses who had less than 2 months of working capital, which means that the working capital situation for businesses increased dramatically from April to June. Now, how did that happen? Right? Basically, that happened largely because the businesses were actually able to cut down on their fixed costs. As a matter of fact, that's one of the first things that businesses did is to cut down on fixed costs. And the easiest cost to cut down for them was their employee cost. So they actually started reducing employee cost. They were also enabled by the fact that there was a large scale reverse migration that happened, especially in the larger cities. But as per our assessment, there were more than 25% of businesses that actually either reduced their employee strength or reduced the salaries or both. And in effect, that gave them a cushion of close to about 40 to 42% of the total employee cost, which they could actually end up saving. That's a huge amount of money, right, which goes directly into their working capital. And that's how they have been able to manage working capital needs as such. Now, if you come to the investment needs, though, and that's where we see a lot of a completely different storyline. And that's very interesting because while businesses are not really looking at investing per se, there are certain businesses who are looking at investing in either a new way of doing things, a new set of product lines which have been opened up due to COVID, or even in terms of bringing in more digital into their business. Now, when it is working capital, these are smaller amounts of monies that businesses need, and therefore they can get whatever is the balance through their informal networks, whether it's friends or families, and therefore you really don't need to go to the bank for those. But when it comes to larger value of money, and in certain cases more risky investments as well, because these are more in terms of growing your business or investing into your business, it becomes that much more difficult for them to find money from anywhere but from the formal networks of banks and financial institutions. And these are the kind of businesses who seem to be a lot more looking at the credit guarantee scheme to take the loans rather than the ones who actually need it to survive and run their business as such.
You've talked about the fact that they need working capital to, let's say, start production, manufacturing, or whatever it might be that they provide. How is it looking in terms from the demand side? They may start producing, but is there enough demand for large parts of the sector, because India is not consuming at the moment?
Yeah. So you're right. The demand has actually dipped significantly over the last 3 to 4 months. India is not consuming. We have seen demand coming back in certain sectors, in certain areas, especially the ones which are addressed by certain kinds of MSMEs. There are certain MSMEs who would be always catering to some of these sectors as such. But demand is a big underscore to all of these discussions that's happening, and demand is something that's going down. At the same time, means the industry is looking at it from the perspective that demand might come back in the next 3 to 4 months. We have a lot of festivals coming in. Typically, we have seen festival periods to be where demands go up significantly. So even if it does not go up to the extent that we have seen in previous years, even if it goes up by 20, 30, 40%, it would still mean significant businesses coming in for a lot of these organizations and the industry as such. The question here is, therefore, are the MSMEs well prepared to be able to leverage that opportunity once it comes in?
Exactly. And what is your view in terms of the general health of this sector in the context of COVID-19 and the lockdown? In your view, what percentage of this sector will perish and cease to exist as we tread along this very rocky road of COVID-19?
Well, we have already started seeing businesses perish. I'm sure all of us would know anecdotally several businesses which were in our neighborhood which have actually closed down since. As per the data that we have, 7% of the businesses that are currently operational have said that they might not be able to survive the next 2 months. And that's significant, right? 7% of businesses is a very significant number. So it is a daunting scenario as we see.
If you had to make recommendations to the government in terms of, let's say, infusing some life into this sector, what would your 2 or 3 recommendations be to better tweak the package?
Well, from the package perspective, I think there are very clearly a few things that government can possibly do. One is, of course, they need to build awareness. That's very clear, because that's the cornerstone for the next set of activities for businesses to do. While mass media and digital is doing its job, I feel that the government needs to be a lot more innovative and leverage the channels that are available beyond these. Use the sets of businesses that are regular in touch with MSMEs to leverage this opportunity, whether it's the banks, the financial institutions. A lot of businesses today use UPI and e-wallets, so businesses which run those, the CAs and tax practitioners, or even the OEMs who actually use the MSMEs either as a supplier or as a part of their distribution network. So these can be actually enabled for the government to get the message across to them. But that's, I think, just one part of it. The larger part is that there is a need for us to look at some of these programs a lot more in detail, and they have to be made more relevant from an MSME perspective. Now let's look at the credit guarantee scheme once again. In the credit guarantee scheme, very clearly what is not working is the fact that there is no incentive for the businesses as such. There is an incentive for the banks to roll out the money, because the the credit is kind of guaranteed by, there's a sovereign guarantee out there. But for the businesses, what would they need? They would need lower interest rates possibly. As a matter of fact, in the survey, we did ask businesses, what is it that you would need to kind of, or what would you like to have from the government? And one of the things that came out very strongly is the need for having softer interest rates for loans that they take.
Coming back to this credit guarantee scheme, it has also been observed and expressed by the sector that while the government was very noble-hearted while outlining this scheme, they don't seem to receive as much love from the banks. So on ground, the technicalities to actually get that loan is also not that simplistic, and I think banks themselves are going through a crisis of sorts, and while yes, the government has said that yes, they are the guarantors, that kind of confidence within this MSME space, which is anyway bleeding, the kind of NPAs that is envisaged is not giving them much comfort to dole out loans easily.
Yeah, that's right. It is a concern, definitely, for the banks as well. And the banks have been, as you said, they have been grappling with very high NPAs at this point in time already. The challenges that they are facing with the NPAs as such, not only in terms of the corporate challenges, but also legal challenges that are actually coming in now for a lot of banks, is also stopping banks from exploring this. The whole idea of this sovereign guarantee was essentially to address all of that, to see how you can get away from all of that and therefore allow access to loans. Unfortunately, as I said, it's a double-edged sword that the government is embarked on. But I don't think it'll work if you only support one end. You need to give something to the other end, because finally it's the MSMEs who will have to take that loan and return back. You won't want to give out loans at this point in time, which are only the risky loans.
Sure. There's also another big issue with that has cropped up because of this. And like you rightly pointed out at the beginning of the interview, that they have managed to cut down on their fixed costs, and that's essentially the easiest way out is to reduce manpower. This has, caused the big conundrum of unemployment in this sector, because, crores have been deemed jobless in a matter of months. And how do you see, what repercussions do you see that happening?
Well, we'll have to wait to see what really happens. My personal take on that are threefold, actually. One is we are seeing a lot of people actually having moved back to their hometowns and villages, might find work there. The government has already, as a part of MNREGA, doing a lot more funding there. So possibly that might work for some of them. What I think would happen, though, is that there are certain industries which need manpower, and they have been larger industries like construction, for example, which are dependent on manpower, and a lot of laborers have actually gone back. A lot of the MSME people who would actually come out, especially the blue collar sets of people, will go into possibly those kind of jobs. Also, you look at the growth of the digital ecosystem as such, whether it's in terms of delivery related activities, whether it's technical activities, etc. Those have actually started going up. So there will be a lot of people who'd come out from the retail industry, for example, shop floor people who might actually take the role of being a delivery person, right, for a big basket or a Grofers or the likes, or even Amazon and Flipkart. Right, so you would see some amount of churn happening through that manner as well, and possibly the available resources would fill in the gaps of where there are opportunities coming in at this point in time. That's the shorter term, as of course economy bounces back, which I'm sure it will do over the next 6 to 12 months. We will start seeing the set of people coming back again, and it'll possibly start. We'll start seeing things happening, or we might also see a completely new kind of business which would be driven from our villages and from our smaller cities. And that's a very big possibility. If that happens, I hope it does, it will actually then spread the opportunities for people across. It will stop crowding the larger cities like Bombay, Bangalore, Delhi. So those are the other ways in which things might actually operate.
That's an interesting observation, Bishwa. But if that is the case, then I think you're, if I'm not mistaken, you're referring to migrant laborers. But if migrant laborers, let's say, find alternative means of livelihoods in and around their villages, then what happens to urban centers like Mumbai, like Bangalore, like Delhi? What happens there?
Well, so see, I'm not only referring to the migrant laborers. Migrant laborers are, of course, a very large chunk of of the movement that's happened. But we've also had movements of the knowledge workers, right? A lot of knowledge workers have actually decided to go back as well to their hometowns. I think at a larger level, what would happen is, as I was saying, it will get spread out. You will need people in the larger cities, and you will, for the larger cities, you will possibly be able to use the kind of resources that you would have. You will continue to attract people. I'm sure the exodus of the last 50 years from the migration from the smaller cities and rural into the larger cities will not stop because of this pandemic alone. What might happen is that it might slow down. And if you are able to retain some amount of talent, whether it's labor talent or it is knowledge worker talent, you might start seeing something develop in the smaller cities as well. That's the hope that I spoke about a lot more, and that's how I see it as one of the options. The other option is obviously all of them coming back. We are already seeing trains and trains of people coming back already to the larger cities like Mumbai, Bangalore, and the likes. So that's already happening.
Well, these are tough and trying times for the nation. Thank you so much for your perspective and your insights, Bishwa. I hope all stakeholders listen carefully to what is being said, take notes and tweak the required changes and implement. I think it's a long journey ahead of us, and hopefully we will come out of these trying times reset, refreshed and ready to take on the world. Thank you so much for your time, Bishwa, once again.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Great pleasure.